is nowhere to hide, nowhere that I can go. I reach out my hand, touching death itself, just a holy day in Sarajevo. I can hear my heart pounding like a clock, hiding from the planes and from the bombing. Fire from the sky, burning down my life. There is no more love and no more longing. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of peace.
At this, the 22nd anniversary of Serbian aggression against the Republic of Croatia and the Republic of Bosnia and Herzegovina, people around the globe recall a terrible war that shocked the conscience of the modern world by its deliberate carnage, primitivism, and countless atrocities. No one can forget the images and reports brought to our attention by the media of concentration camps, ethnic cleansing, mass graves, starving prisoners, sex camps, tens of thousands of rape victims, Sarajevo under siege, citizens marched to their deaths in Vukovar, the shelling of the medieval city Dubrovnik, thousands of innocents murdered in Srebrenica, destroyed towns, villages, religious sites, burned libraries, and shelled museums. Nor should we forget the courage of those who fought against evil and died in the war, and those who endured bizarre indignities and managed to survive.
My
family was gathered in our apartment. The soldier grabbed me. I begged him not to do anything. You leave me alone for the sake of my child, I said. He told me that he would kill my parents. He said these words: "First, I'll kill your mother. Then I'll kill your father. And then I'll kill your husband. You and your daughter, I'll leave for my pleasure." He raped me and left. And I stayed in my room, just crying.
The rape, harassment, and abuse began in the camp in Sremska Mitrovica. They did it every day. I wasn't raped by Serbs who came from Serbia, Serbian soldiers, or Chetniks. I was raped by the Serbs from my own city, Vukovar, with whom I lived my whole life and with whom I had shared the good and the bad. After numerous rapes, they took me to a room for execution. There, I found my daughter with her 4-year-old son, my grandson. My grandson was taken away, and we have never seen him again. My daughter had to watch me being raped, and I had to watch the rape of my daughter. I did not return to Vukovar because the Serbs who killed, raped, tortured, and robbed us still live in that city. Not one of them has yet been held accountable for his crimes. When inmates of the camps gather each year to commemorate our suffering, Vukovar Serbs scornfully laugh and humiliate us. Those are still real Chetniks.
This film addresses the experiences and concerns of tens of thousands of women who were raped in the war and are still awaiting prosecution of their victimizers, still seeking official status as victims of war crimes, entitled to moral, spiritual, and financial assistance. The widespread systematic use of rape as an instrument of war by the Serbian military in the recent war, 1991 to 1997, has been documented by the UN and the International Tribunal for the Former Yugoslavia. The UN estimates that between 20,000 and 60,000 women were raped by the Serbian military.
My street was predominantly inhabited by Serbs, so this part of the city was less shelled. Serbs had their wives and children seek safe haven in the Yugoslav army base when they were shooting at us. A Serbian soldier told me that my father was killed in the apartment. I went to the apartment and found my father dead on the couch. Above him, on the wall, was written, "We Serbs killed your dad. This is Serbia." On his forehead, they carved "U." On his cheeks, the symbols for the Chechnik Army Corps. The next morning, I found my husband dead in the apartment. Then 2 Serbian soldiers put their hand grenades and Kalashnikovs on my table. One soldier ordered me to leave the room with the other after the first did his job on me. Then the second soldier took his turn.
In 2001, the Hague Tribunal elevated systematic rape from being a mere violation of the customs of war to one of the most heinous war crimes of all, a crime against humanity, second only to genocide. Amnesty International describes the verdict as a significant step for women's human rights. Sexual enslavement in armed conflict is now legally held to account. 3 Bosnian Serb officers were found guilty of the systematic and savage rape, torture, and enslavement of Muslim women in 1992 in the town of Foča in southern Bosnia. They were convicted on 19 separate counts. The UN prosecutor Dirk Reineveld said, "This is the first case where sexual slavery has been charged. What sets this apart is that this is a case in which we have a large rape camp organization. This is the first case of sexual enslavement and the only one with sexual assaults and no murders." However, 20 years later, Margot Wallström, UN Specialist Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, reported that as of 2010, only 12 cases out of the tens of thousands of rapes were prosecuted. As of 2012, only 40 cases were prosecuted by the Hague Tribunal and local courts. To date, there has been no coordinated attempt to create a database of these victims. Amnesty International researcher Elena Wassilou states that the women who went through this suffering have received very little help from the government. Politicians are reluctant to address these issues. According to Viera Jovanovic, recent president of the Helsinki Committee in Bosnia-Herzegovina, this issue of rape victims is kept under wraps. This is still a traditional male-dominated society, and these victims are pushed into the shadows. People pretend they don't exist. The goal of this project is to give voice to women who were victims of rape in the Balkan War, in an effort to grant them the status of victims of war crimes, entitled to every means of assistance and support, to bring the perpetrators to justice, and to challenge the worldwide practice of rape as an instrument of terror in warfare. In the midst of the war, a 10-year-old child's prayer captures the desperate call for a return to sanity and human decency. It appears to the child that divine intervention is the only hope that the forces of goodness can overpower the forces of darkness.
Ja molim svim srcem svojim Gospoda nam sve ljude Hrvatske sačuva od smrti i pakla.
Molim te da Hrvatska sva sja u zlatu.
Molim da sva djeca budu sretna.
Molim te, Gospe, daj mome tati u selu da ne bude ranjen ili mrtav. Molim te, umiri srpski narod od prokletosti. Molim te, Gospe, pomozi mi.
As Maria Slišković has written, there is a conspiracy of silence about the crimes. The women are alone in their suffering. The criminals are among us. The victims contribute not only to the defense, but to the establishment of a free, democratic state. It is not and will not be free or democratic until it has the strength to demand justice, punishment, and compensation from the aggressor state, as well as the validation of the sufferings of each and every victim.
They collected many of us women on the street. The first woman had to carry a white cloth that symbolized to all that we were free for the taking for sex. They walked us through the city. They separated the men from the women and the children from their mothers. The city was full of dead people. They were killing people on all sides of us. It was a horror. There were passionate cries. People were killed in mass. People without a head. Severed body pieces all around, streams of blood on the road. A Serbian soldier said, "So now you see what we have done today." Pregnant women had to stand while Serbian soldiers threw machetes around them, and everyone else had to watch. The soldiers raped me in the nursery. The first soldier was a homosexual. He did awful, perverted things that I cannot talk about. It is a disaster that has haunted me for years. I cannot even pronounce the words of what they did to me. They were dirty and disgusting. There were certainly 15 or 16 Serbian soldiers. They all raped me, one after the other. One after the other.
Ja sam Žaklina, inače sam iz
I am
Vukovara.
Jacqueline.
Živjela sam do
I lived in Vukovar. I was 18 years old in 1991 when the war began. My daughter was 8 months old. When Vukovar was occupied by Serbian soldiers, they kept me in an apartment there, alone with my daughter and my 8-year-old sister. After multiple rapes and torture, they took me to a concentration camp. They kept me, my sister, and my child there for many months. My sister and I were raped and tortured every day. We suffered terribly. They would rape me and throw their heavy uniforms on my small baby to muffle her cries. By some miracle, she survived. After being released from the concentration camp, I returned to Vukovar, where I lived for 3 years. But I couldn't bear to live there because friends of the people who tortured me in the camp threatened that my daughter would have the same destiny as me. So once again I had to escape my city and fear that my daughter could endure my same fate. When I got out of the camp in 1992, I gave a statement to the court about my wartime experiences, about everything that happened to me. The court gathered evidence from 1992 until 2007. In that time, they apprehended only 2 criminals, and nothing has yet been decided about them. I have not received any satisfaction of my claims. I have been a victim of war crimes without any rights, no recognition of what I endured for all these years.
When we talk about amnesty, I think first of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. It says that anyone who rebelled against the United States or any state within the United States cannot participate in public service or act politically at the decision-making level. In Croatia, that is not so. People who were on the side of the aggressor, who held high positions in the occupying army, today are members of the Croatian parliament. This sends completely the wrong message to the Croatian and Serbian public. Today, 22 years after the war, we have Croatian citizens of Serbian descent who don't accept Croatia as their homeland. They advocate for Greater Serbia. Unfortunately, we must face the fact that the sexually violated women have not been officially recognized and given the status of war victim. The criminals have not been punished. Under these conditions, civilized cohabitation is impossible. Today, 22 years after the war, we are still seeking recognition of the status of these women as war victims and still seeking to bring the criminals to justice.
I was in Croatia and Bosnia when the news reports came out about the rape camps and about the women who had been raped by the Serbs. And I remember accompanying a Western journalist, I won't mention the newspaper name, who did some interviews. And when he submitted his report, the newspaper would not publish it. In general, I recall during that time period very vividly that there was minimal coverage, except for a few newspaper accounts in Germany. The horrors of the women who were raped simply were not reported or picked up by the West. I would explain that as follows. The Croats and the Bosnian Muslims were, because of the propaganda that I talked about, seen as less than European, less than, if you will, white. And unfortunately, these kinds of things do matter. I think that the rape of white women in the West is something that's taken seriously. But when it is the rape or the mistreatment of women who are a minority, and what I'm saying here is that Croats and Muslims were depicted as a minority in that sense, it's invisible. The very fact that the West basically turned a blind eye to the conflict in Rwanda, where again rapes were involved, I think supports this overall argument. So it's not the fact of the rape occurring, again, it's the social construction, which is always through the lens and the filter of the Western prism, which unfortunately is ethnically biased. The rapes that were occurring against Croatian and Bosnian Muslim women were part of an organized tactic of warfare. By that I mean, again, this is sociology and anthropology at work. By raping the women, the Serbs knew that those women would be treated as outcasts when they were reintegrated afterwards in their communities. And by causing this kind of upheaval in the family structure of those families, they would again weaken them, demoralize them, and make it easier to achieve a military victory. So I think we have to look at the rape not just as an individual crime, but as a military tactic of aggression.
Once I had a home, once my life was good, once my mother sang to me and held me. Then the fire came, falling from the sky. There is no one left who can protect me. War's a wicked bird that never comes to rest, feeding on the dreams of all the children. War's an evil bird flying in the dark. Every holy promise has been broken. But when I close my eyes, I dream of peace. I dream of flowers on the hill. I dream I see my mother smiling. When I close my eyes, I dream of
He was there one Sunday morning at the corner of the square, in a freshly pressed tuxedo, in a simple folding chair. Just after curfew lifted, while everything was still. He played his cello in the morning chill. In the streets of Sarajevo, a place of flame and death, this music so surprising that the whole world held its breath. And each morning he'd return to that spot and he would play in the streets of Sarajevo every day. And every day made me wonder, where did he ever find music amidst the madness and the courage to be kind? That long forgotten beauty we thought was blown away in the streets of Sarajevo every day.